Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. Today we are picking up where we left off with the Peppermint Stripe Bustle, which if you saw last week's video ended on kind of a distressed note, I guess, or at least a stressed note. I had stayed up very late working on the sleeves and then put it on and thought that they looked terrible. So that's where we left off. That was yesterday. So today we are picking back up with this project. I posted a little reel of it on Instagram to see just what other people were thinking about how those sleeves were fitting. And almost everyone was saying like, they look great. If you want to do anything, you could maybe put some padding right here. But the sleeves overall, I am going to leave as is, and I'm going to ignore the fact that I feel like they make my arms look weird, but I think it's a stripe direction thing and not really my arm thing or the sleeve thing or how it's fitting or any of that. I think it's all in the stripe direction. So anyway, if you haven't seen that video, I will link that up above and down below in the description, along with the rest of the videos of the Peppermint Bustle project. This should hopefully be the last video of the Peppermint Bustle project because I tend to get bored with projects after 4 weeks and we have just passed the 4-week mark. So this is it. We gotta finish it this week. That's my goal. And honestly, there's really not that much left to be done. At this point, what needs to be done is I need to finish the sleeve ends and do the cuff, which it's not even gonna be a real cuff, it's just gonna be velvet ribbon trim. I need to bind off the bottom of the bodice because currently it is just a serged edge. So I need to figure out what I want to do there, which I was going to leave until at least after the sleeves are finished, maybe even some of the other trimming, just so I can see kind of, do I want like a solid velvet binding, for example, that to match the collar and cuffs, or do I want just a plain binding, or etc. So I have to see what's going to look best there. And then the only other thing is to add some bows. I'm planning on adding some bows to the shoulder here and also some to like the sides of the skirts, I think. Maybe the back, but probably just the sides of the skirts where the overskirt is picked up. And then the other part of this project to finish off the project is I do want to make a matching hat. So I think that that is going to be like an actual Buckram make as opposed to decorating a hat, but I am going to look at what hats I have like in my stash that could potentially work and see if there's one that I already have so that I don't need to build an entirely new one. But all of that should be happening this week and I'll go in this video. So I'm going to start off with finishing the sleeve ends here. Right now they're not even hemmed and they don't have any trim on them. So the first thing then that I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this to the inside, or apply bias tape, fold it to the inside, stitch down that bias tape, which I can do by machine because it's going to have velvet ribbon over the top of it, and put the velvet ribbon over the top, which will probably have to be by hand just because of the narrowness of the sleeve, unfortunately. So I am going to get to it. So the sleeve hems are now finished. I'm really quite pleased with how they came out. They have the binding on the inside, which is just the bias binding that you get in a pack from Joann's. And I did that by machine like I mentioned that I would. And then that stitch is covered over because the velvet ribbon. I did stitch on the velvet ribbon by hand because once I had it pinned in place, there was really just no way, like I can't fit this under the machine because of how narrow it is. It's not big enough to go around the, what's that called? The free arm of the machine. It's not big enough to do that. It's just too small. In fact, it was just big enough without the ribbon on, but then once the ribbon with the pins and everything, it couldn't get on at all. So anyway, the ribbon is now on. I used kind of like a running prick stitch. You can kind of see some of those stitches as it goes in and out of focus, but it's pretty hard to tell where they are. And I think it looks really, really nice together. So I'm very happy with how that is and how it coordinates so nicely with the collar. I think it really just picks up. I may add lace at the bottom of this cuff too. I think that I will, but I didn't have any other lace that looked anything like this. So I think I'm going to have to go to Joann's sometime this week and see if I can find more lace like this because I have like 4 inches left. And if I can, then I will go ahead and add that at the bottom of the cuff, because I think that would be kind of a nice little touch, a nice little ruffle. I might go for something that's just slightly wider than this if I can find it. And if not, I'll just go for, like, they should, I think, still have the same. I'm pretty sure this was from Joann's. And so if I can find that or something similar, I will put that on here. But this means that the bodice is now pretty close to done. I need to put those bows up here on the shoulders, and I need to bind the hem. So that means that I'll probably do the bows first tomorrow, because it's time to go to bed. And then I will put everything on and just see what I want to do here. Whether I want to do that as a nice big wide red type of thing or what. I do also have more of this braid left. I think this is enough to go around the waist. So that's a possibility too. If I like just bind the waist but then put the braid on, that might kind of tie in nicely to the skirts. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm not really sure yet, but I am liking where this is going. So I just measured this braid with against how wide around the waist is, and this is not at all long enough. So I'm going to try to find more of this, but I also did this, and I love it. It ties in the braid down on the skirts and just has such a nice finish on that velvet. So I think I'm going to do this no matter what, because I don't have enough of this currently for the waist, and I'm going to try to maybe get more of this for the waist, but again, not positive. I do also like the idea of doing the ribbon around here, or velvet in general around there. I have a velvet that is a pretty close match to this, because I don't think that ribbon is going to be able to bind this, is the thing, since this is a curve and the ribbon has no curving ability. So I also don't think I have enough ribbon left, because I have like this much of the spool. This was only 3 yards to begin with, and I've already used up probably close to a yard. And so that's 2 yards left, and I still have to do the bows on the shoulder and potentially bows on the skirt. So yeah, that's probably not going to work, but I do have a velvet that I might be able to use for the binding instead. And I kind of think that a little bit of that binding to break it up would be a really nice thing. So now I'm going to start in on making the bows that will go on the shoulder. This is all out of that same velvet ribbon that I've used for the cuffs and the collar. And what I started with is I have one piece of ribbon that's like folded over. I've just pinned it in place right now, but it's overlapping just a tiny bit, like 1/4 of an inch or so in the center here. And don't have a ruler on me, but I think this is like about 4 inches long or so. And then I have the little bow tails, which I've done the little like points on, because that's what it looks like in the fashion plate. And I have melted all of the edges of this, by the way, including these little points, which were a little bit harder to do, but still possible. And these are just overlapped on top of each other, kind of at that angle, and then pinned. And then this, or also this, because I just used whatever was left, so this one has a weird angle, but these are the center points. So what's going to happen is I'm going to stitch these together first, just like probably really big stitches to just kind of hold them in place. I'm doing this all by hand, by the way. And I'm stitching those first, then I'm going to wrap it with this, which will just go around kind of like that and meet in the back. I'm doing this one-handed, so it does not look good. And then that will lay over on top of this, and those tails will be whipped to it in the back. So yeah, that is the thing. And then I'm gonna hand sew these to the shoulders, and hopefully that will cover up my issues with the sleeves and make me feel better about the shoulders of the sleeves. But I'm going to go ahead and do 2 of those, and unfortunately that leaves me with not very much ribbon left at all. So I'm going to attempt to get more today, but this was Christmas ribbon, so I'm probably not going to be able to. So this is all I have left. And I'm probably going to have to get some sort of a coordinated ribbon, which probably won't be velvet, unfortunately, for the skirts, and just have this as like maybe a tiny bit of it, because yeah, there's no more left. Oh well. So a couple of things. First, the bows are assembled, and I realize that this looks like Christmas on my sweater, but I have assembled the bows. You can see kind of how they are stitched together back here. A little bit, just pretty big stitches. And now that I've assembled them, they will need to go on the bodice. On that note, I am having a bit of a dilemma with the stripey project, because I went to Joann's today to get Ideally more of the velvet ribbon, but I figured that'd be hard to find, so otherwise I was going to get wide satin ribbon to do the trim bits on the skirt, like these ribbon bits. And Joann's didn't have wide red satin ribbon. They had one that was like about 1 5/8 maybe 1 7/8 inch wide, and was the very wrong shade of red, and that was literally it. No wide satin ribbon, and I don't have wide red satin ribbon, so I'm gonna have to figure out what I want to do on that, or that's going to have to be a detail that's going to be added later, like after the final reveal of this project. So I am bummed about that. I also did not find any more of the velvet ribbon, so I have like that 20 inches left or whatever, and that's it. So yeah, I think my skirts are going to be kind of ribbonless for now. On the plus side, I did find more of the braided trim. So I can put that braided trim around the waist of the bodice, which I think is going to be a really nice way to tie in the skirts with the bodice. And I'm also going to put that around the sleeves as well, so that everything kind of ties in that unified way. So I am excited about that. I just have to figure out how I want to bind the bottom of the bodice and then put that trim on, and I can go ahead and put that trim on the sleeves and put the little bows on the shoulders. So I'll probably do that hand sewing stuff, the trim on the sleeves, bows on the shoulders tonight, and I think that's about all I'm gonna have time for. So their binding should hopefully happen tomorrow. So I've sewn on the braid above the velvet on the end of the sleeve, and I really, really like the way that it's looking. I just did whip stitches down either side of the braid, and I think it looks so, so nice. So now I did not actually sew the bows down yet because I realized I should probably put this on again to make sure I have the bows in the right place first, and then I will sew them on. And I have decided that for the bottom of the waist, I am going to do velvet binding. This, however, is my remaining ribbon, which is not enough for the entire waist, and also it's ribbon, so it doesn't curve. So what I'm actually going to be doing is I have some like kind of cheapo poly velvet, but it's the best match that I have for this velvet, and I have enough that I should be able to take a bias strip. So I'm going to make some bias strips out of the velvet because, yeah, if velvet wasn't bad enough, let's make bias velvet. And I'm going to make some bias strips and do the binding on here, and then I think I'm going to add the braid over the top of that as well, but I really like the way that the velvet like anchors that look. I know it looks a little dark in this light, which is weird because it's the exact same as that sleeve, but the other velvet will be also the same, just not the same, if that makes any sense. So that will hopefully all get done tomorrow. And actually at that point, since I don't have the satin ribbon for the skirts right now, once that's done, this is done. And then we can move on to the hat. Oh my gosh, you guys, this bodice is so close to being done. I put the velvet on here, which was kind of a pain to do, but I love the way it looks. I mean, like, hello, look at that. I love it. So this is some velvet. It's like cheapo poly velvet that my friend Emily of the Sucky Seamstress gave me because she was getting rid of some stuff when I was helping her clean out her sewing room. And it was just about like a yard of it, and so I just took a bias strip that went diagonally across the entire yardage, and it happened to be pretty much perfect length for the waist of this. I think I had like 3 inches extra on that strip. So it was a 3-inch wide strip, and I sewed it on about 0.75 inches away from the edge and doing a stitch here, like right sides together. And then I folded it over and then folded it over again on the back. And the back is hand sewn down. This side is machine sewn, and then yeah, hand sewn on the back. The corner kind of tripped me up a little bit, but I think it came out okay, and everything looks good. Like there's some kind of bias wrinkling. I'm hoping that that will kind of go away like as I wear it. I have not yet tried it on, but I had been thinking about putting the braid on top, and now I'm thinking I don't want the braid on top. I did put the braid on the sleeves. I can't remember if I showed this to you or not. I think I did. So I really like it on the sleeves, but I think I just like the solid on here because it really picks up the bow and the collar so nicely, and the cuff. When we zoom out a little bit more, it's just such a nice combo, such a pop. And I think that putting the braid on here would actually make it too heavy. So that means that all I have to do is try this on tomorrow and figure out if the bows are in the right place, and if so, sew them down, and you guys, then it's done. Like, what? I mean, I need to make a hat, but what? Yeah, crazy. So I have the bodice on for the first time since the other day, and the bows are still just pinned in place. It's very, very difficult to pin bows in place on your shoulders while you're like corseted and wearing tight bodice sleeves and stuff. So I don't think they're quite even, but they're really close, and I think I know where they're hitting like the stripes or the pleats or etc., so that I can make sure that they match once I take this off. The hard part will be seeing if I have pinned through my chemise, because I probably have, because I poked myself with the pins. So yeah. And then in other news, I also decided, well, just now, literally, I decided that I want a little bit of lace at the end of the sleeves. I tried by putting both of my gloves on and putting just a little bit of lace at the end of my sleeve here and just seeing which one I liked better. And I decided that I do like the one with the lace. I feel like it kind of eases that gap between the glove and the sleeve. So I do have to sew in the lace. I should have just enough to do 2 cuffs because I measured them and bought only that much. So I had to do bows and lace, and also I went to Joann's today, a third Joann's. If you've been following, this is now the third Joann's that I'm looking for wide red ribbon at. And I found wide red ribbon. They actually had a couple different varieties. They had 2 different shades of grosgrain plus 2 shades of satin, but only one of the satins was in like the wide one that I wanted. And I realized the grosgrains were actually like matching a lot better. And so I brought home 2 different colors of grosgrain to see what would go. And I was surprised to find that it's actually this kind of more burgundy red that is going a lot better with the rest of the ensemble. And that's mostly because the other red that I bought, which I think I already put back towards the car to return, is way too bright. It's a shade brighter, just a hair bit brighter than the stripes of the fabric. And then of course all of the trimming is a darker red. And so this does a pretty decent job of matching the darker red. So I'm going to use this nice 3-inch wide ribbon to do the trimming on the sides of the skirt, and that way I can get those bows in. I might incorporate my last little bit of velvet ribbon too. And I did actually find a velvet ribbon that's like almost a twin to this in a narrower width when I was at the second Joann's on Tuesday. So I might kind of combine those and layer them and have them be as bows hanging off the side. So I have to play around with the configuration of that and then sew in these last tiny little bits of the bodice. And then that is it for the dress itself, and I can move on to the hat. I literally pinned myself in on both shoulders. So, I'm not sure how to get out of this with knowing where my bows go and with literally getting out of this. I might need assistance from my roommate. All right, so bows are on, lace is on, and I'm super happy with how this looks overall. And that means that the only thing that I have left to do is to put the bows on the overskirt. Now, I am not going to show you the full ensemble all together on me until after I have finished the hat, because once I do the bows on the overskirt, that's what I have to do. So right now, hat-wise, I'm kind of weighing my options. Using both the fashion plate and my favorite book, Shoes, Hats, and Fashion Accessories, that is such a good book for fashion accessories, which I will link down below, I went and I looked up what hats would look like. So you can see like there's some here, for example, and those are in 1884. And then we've got like this cool hat over here. So those are all kind of in the same sort of like a tall hat style as the fashion plate here. So I'm trying to figure out if this is something that I can just decorate a hat, or if this is a hat that I'm going to have to make from scratch. And I haven't quite figured that out yet. I need to do a little bit more experimentation first. I have 2 potential hats that might work as a hat that I could just decorate. One of them is this, which I decorated in a steampunk manner for when I went to SteamCon wearing my 18th century redingote with a Victorian style blouse. years ago. So that's what this is, but it basically, we're just looking at kind of like a wool, I don't even know if it's real wool, but it's a wool felt type hat, and this is all just laid on there, so very, very easy to take off. So that is one option, but it kind of has the right shape-ish. It's a little shallow here, but it might work. The other option is this straw hat that I got at a thrift store fairly recently, sometime last year, and it is a funky hat because like it could kind of work like this, but the crown would be a little bit short, but this crown is also like multi-tiered. So with some difficulty, you can actually pop it up, and I could potentially steam this into shape to be a tall hat. So that is going to be my first plan, is to actually steam this whole hat and see if I can get it into that taller shape that I'm looking for, but with kind of like a narrower around and round top of the crown. But the brim is pretty close, and like the size of the hat is pretty close, ignore that part, to what I'm looking for this. So if I can make this work, my goal would be to then be able to cover the brim of the hat with velvet. And then the around the crown of the hat as like a really, really large band, I would be covering that with bias of the stripy fabric. And the top, I might put more velvet on, or I might just put a whole bunch of feathers and trim and whatever on top of the hat. But if I do all of that, is it actually just easier to make my own hat from scratch? So that is the question. I think I am still going to steam this and just see what it does if I steam it, because in the shape that it is now, it's really not any sort of historical style. It's more like, I don't know, beachwear. So I think I am going to steam it and just see what it'll do, if it will remotely work. Because if it doesn't remotely work, I'm just going to make one out of Buckram. That's where I'm at currently. I'm going to play around with bows. I will show you what it looks like just on the dress form with the bows on, and then I'm going to start steaming and playing around with the hat. So I'm playing around with trim options currently for these ribbons, and I'm trying to decide what I like best. So what I have so far, I found out that I actually did not like either of those grosgrain ribbons that I got today. They just make everything look super, super plain and ugly, and really brings down the whole dress and cheapens it. And I mean, why wouldn't it? It's grosgrain, right? So anyway, I've kind of mocked together some alternate ribbon options. So this is the first one. This is taking I think a vintage satin ribbon, a narrow one, plus the narrow velvet ribbon that I was able to get a couple days ago, and one strand of my wide velvet ribbon, because I only have enough that each one could have one on each side. And it kind of mixes those all together into this sort of look right here. And I don't know, I think it's like too stringy, too much going on, and I think it's kind of a little distracting. But that is option number one for this. Option number two, no bow at all. Plain and simple, that would mean that she's done, but I think it's a little too plain. And option number three is to use the velvet that I used here. So this is velvet fabric, to like make my own ribbon basically. So that would be kind of something like this. I've done one strip of this already. There would be another tail hanging down, and possibly I would even want to back this with another thing of velvet because it's just plain on the underside. So if it flips, it looks very poly, whereas this side is poly, but it doesn't look so bad. But it would look something like that. And the way that I'm doing this, I just want to kind of show you here, is I'm actually melting the sides, because again, this is polyester, so like you can totally do that. So I am just taking this strip, this is a 3-inch strip of the velvet fabric that I've cut, and my lighter, and I am just running the lighter along the side of this velvet. You want to do it just super, super quickly and gently. When I get about halfway down the strip, it becomes too wavy for me to do that. So I have to move down and hold it kind of where I've left off here, making sure to keep the other tail away, and then I can continue down the rest of the length, because you don't want it waving in the wind, or it gets much harder to do. Now this does, because this is such cheap velvet, it does kind of tend to make it wrinkle a little bit, but I think it's okay. It's not a big deal of the wrinkling. And it'd be something like that, but again, not with it flipping all around. So I am leaning towards this look, but also probably would have to back the velvet, which means I have to have enough velvet because I only have so much. It's on the bias, so I'm cutting like the long side piece of the 1 yard and putting them together. So I'm gonna give it a go and see how it goes, because I am leaning towards this, but I'm just not sure. So when I go to steam a hat to try to get it into a different shape, basically what I'm gonna be trying to do here is like practically saturate this with steam. Now this is kind of a stiffer straw, so it's kind of a question mark as to how it will work. But I mean, really, I'm just like taking my iron and just like going at it with lots and lots of steam. And I will normally do the outside and then also the inside. And I don't normally use like my steamer. I normally use my iron to create the steam, because my steamer just puts out steam, whereas my iron, I can tell it when I want it to put out steam and when I don't want it to, like I control it. So I prefer the iron route. And really what I should be doing is I should have some sort of like a hat form or something like that, which I can put this over. But since I don't really know what the shape is going to wind up at, I don't have a hat form currently. I'm really not sure what would be the best shape, honestly, like what I would have lying around the house. But that's normally what I do, is I'll find something lying around the house, like a bowl or something like that, to use. I don't know if this is gonna work. This is really a weird shape. This is gonna take so much steam. So I am gonna keep going at this and maybe give you a little time lapse. So after all of that steaming, I feel like it's still not quite coming out the shape that I want. I could probably go ahead and get this bump out if I really worked at it, but that is the bump from where the hat folded in. And then the other thing though that it's not really doing right is that the crowns in this era tended to taper quite a bit more sharply, and then we're flat on top, which the flat on top is not a problem, but it just doesn't seem to want to taper to the level that these hats liked to taper. And so I think that that is not going to work. It looks really silly. So what I dug out then is I have made an 1880s hat before. It's not exactly the right style, but I think that it's close, and I even managed to find the pattern that I drafted for it. So this is that hat, which was made for a seaside type bustle and will not stay on my head right now because I'm wearing the wrong hairstyle, obviously. But that is the hat with the nice tapered crown. So I'm going to use this pattern to try and tweak something close-ish to this shape into the hat that I'm going for, which again is going to be with a smaller brim, but I think that's going to be the best bet. So I will be doing that on Saturday. Today is Thursday night. I am probably not going to sew at all tomorrow because I'm going to go put on a bustle dress and hang out in the snow. So I've been procrastinating making my hat literally all freaking day, all Saturday, as in my big sewing day when I'm supposed to actually work on things. And so I've been doing the procrastination by working on these bows, which look like simple little whatever bows, but they're not at all, because they're not made out of ribbon, they're made out of velvet fabric. So basically what happened is I cut 3-inch strips, which I showed you before, and I melted the edge, but then I think I showed you that they flopped over, they looked terrible because they looked like all polyester. So I have been painstakingly sewing together 2 strips by hand right along the edge, because that would have been a pain in the butt on the machine. So I've whipped stitched them together, and I had to do that for all of the pieces for 2 bows. Anyway, it was a lot, and then I sewed together the bows, which that part went pretty easily, but doing these took all day, and I just couldn't be bothered making a hat because I think the problem is that like I have nowhere to wear the hat, and so it just feels silly to like make a hat right now. But I mean, I need a hat to finish the outfit, so like I just have no motivation for it. So I'm gonna make this vlog go longer than Saturday because I'm determined to make the hat in this vlog. So maybe tomorrow I'll make a hat because I just don't want to. Anyway, good night. Oh yeah, I guess I should show you. This is what the bows look like on the dress. They are not actually sewn on because this is 2 seconds later than when the last clip ended. So I still have to sew them on, but I wasn't really sure where this waistline hits the skirt when I'm wearing it, so I wanted to put it on first and then mark that. So honestly, I will probably sew these bows on when I go to do the final reveal thing, because that just makes more sense to me. Then I'll have everything on and I won't need to worry about it and whatever, but I need to make the hat first. So anyway, I do like it. I think they really echo the bows on the shoulders, and it's really cute, and I like the velvet touches. So that is it. Okay, so I am back at it again today, now Sunday, determined to make this hat. So I think I am just going to use these as is. I did have a note on here that I wrote when I used this last to say cut 3/8 inch larger, so hopefully that's true. I'm going to compare it against the existing hat. I don't know why I said that, but maybe, yeah, I think that's basically to do the little fold downs, because when you make a hat, you have to do these little like folds for the top of the crown and also for the brim so that they can connect together with the sides of the crown. So yeah, I'm gonna make this 3/8 inch longer or wider across. This one appears to match all of the dimensions that I wrote on here, or at least it appears to match the hat that I already have that I've made in the past. And then this is the one that's really changing. So it seems like the inner circle is correct for what I need for what goes with the old hat and the existing pattern, but obviously I don't want my brim for this hat to be that big. The brim really wants to be about this size. So this brim is about like 1 3/4 inches wide, but then those little folds that I mentioned, you need to add another 1/2 inch. So it's going to be 2 1/4 inches. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to lay this on a piece of paper, trace around the inside, and then do my 2 1/4 inches around that. And that'll be the first step. Once that's done, then I can start cutting everything out in Buckram. It's been a little bit since I made a Buckram hat. I think the last one was going to be my giant hat for the Governor Radcliffe 1830s outfit. But I have my Buckram. I don't have much left, but this is a small hat, so it should be totally fine. And basically with this Buckram, this is like a sturdy Buckram, but it's not double Buckram, which is what you want for hats. So I am going to be cutting each piece out twice in this. And then I also have millinery wire, and I'm going to put millinery wire around the outside of the brim. Sometimes you put that around the outside of like, or the inside of the brim too. I don't think I'm gonna need that on this, so I'm gonna forgo that step on this and hopefully not regret that. But it's such a small hat that I don't really see me needing that. Famous last words? I don't know. And then the other part is that I don't think I have flannel fabric for mulling. I will have to check through my stash and see, but you are supposed to mull hats, which means that once you put your buckram together, you're going to cut out all of your pieces both in your exterior fabrics, but also in flannel or something like that that's like a soft fabric that will basically mean that you won't see the buckram through your exterior fabrics. Now, my exterior fabrics, I'd love to do this whole hat out of velvet because then it would be more versatile. Then I could take the stripy band off and use this for multiple things. So I'm gonna have to work that out and see what fits. With velvet, I probably don't need to mull because velvet is a thick enough fabric as it is that the buckram should not show through. If you're using like a silk or something like that, you absolutely need mulling, because otherwise all that buckram is gonna show right through your hat. So I don't know if this is gonna show up on camera at all, but there is, for example, a row of zigzag stitching right here, and you can literally see it through the fabric. This is not even a silk taffeta, this is a poly taffeta, but yeah, you can see things through there, and that is what mulling is for. And I don't know that I've ever actually gotten to mull a hat, because I always forget that I don't have flannel. This hat also is only made out of, I believe, a single layer of buckram, so it's just like not ideal. It's a little crushy, and this was back in like 2015, so I didn't really know what I was doing then, but it still looks pretty and the pattern still works. So I don't know how much I'm gonna actually be able to finish today, because hat making is kind of slow, but also pretty sure I'm just gonna glue most of this hat. I don't have the patience for this project anymore, so therefore I don't have the patience to do all of the hand sewing. Despite what I did on the bows yesterday, I was just crazy and procrastinating. So I want to get this finished. I am going to dive in, start working with this and cutting everything out, and hopefully I'll have enough velvet. All of my pieces are now cut out, so that is 2 pieces of buckram for each piece, so 6 pieces of buckram total, and all of the buckram pieces I have pinned together so that both sides are together. The next thing is going to be stitching on these. I generally do like a zigzag stitch or so to kind of hold them together near the edges, though on this, actually on both of these pieces, with the parts where they have to like actually go together, you want to make sure that that stitch is like a 1/2 inch in from the edge, so you don't cut through your stitches as you are making your little crenellation tabs. So that's going to be the next thing there. It was close for me being able to cut out the velvet. Luckily, it dawned on me that I don't need the lining to be out of the velvet other than on the brim. So I had to cut out 2 brim pieces, 1 crown piece, I listen like the side of the crown, and 1 crown piece top of the crown. I haven't actually cut out the lining yet, so I guess I do still have to cut that out. Not sure what fabric I'm going to use for the lining, but it's going to be some sort of scrap. And those are all cut out. I did kind of test it just by holding up like a piece of the velvet to the buckram to see if this is going to be something that I need to mull. And like, yeah, it probably would be better if I mulled it, but I can't see any lines through it, so I'm not too worried. I'm not going to mull it, and great, one less thing to, you know, cut out and worry about layer wise. So that means that next bit is cutting out those lining pieces that I forgot, doing the zigzags and stuff to assemble the buckram pieces, adding the millinery wire around the brim of the buckram, and then I get to actually like start putting things together. So that will be good. I'll probably check in with you before I put things together and just show you what everything looks like at that step. All right, so I've completed all of my kind of first steps of the hat. I did remember to cut out the lining. I've just done it out of this poly taffeta. I don't even know if it's a like it's just poly, but it'll be fine for the lining. No one sees that, and it's smooth, which means that it won't get caught in my hair. So that's what I like about a lining. And then I've taken my base pieces here. They do have the little zigzag stitches on them. I don't know if you can see that even at all, but like there's one there and there's around the top too. And then I've overlapped the edges by a 1/2 inch and just glued these down with hot glue. And then the hardest part about making hats to me is I remembered that you are supposed to have millinery wire around the top of the crown. I think that's so it doesn't get crushed, but if you're more familiar with hat making, tell me why that is. I really don't know. So anyway, I've done my millinery wire on here, but I swear every time that I do this, my millinery wire just winds up a tiny bit too big for this, no matter how many times I've measured it. And I have a feeling today is the same, because it just kind of feels that way. Like when I put them together, it just kind of feels that way. So that's frustrating. I have also put my millinery wire around the brim of the hat. This one goes on much easier. It's just right here at the edge. So you just kind of zigzag over it on the machine, and that's all done. Again, sometimes I see patterns with millinery wire right here. I'm not doing that. I don't know what it's for. I guess maybe so it doesn't crush as much there either, but I've never really felt any benefit from that one, but the crown one I think is important. So anyway, this has some zigzags on it as well. I don't know how well you can see any of these because it's the white on white. And then you can see hopefully that millinery wire here around the edge zigzagged on. So I decided that my wire was just like way too big around to fit into this. So I actually went and undid half of the wire and made it smaller and cut off some of the excess. So now it should fit. Now it might be too small, but I guess it's better to be too small. I don't know. So I'm going to cut off kind of the excess because I want about a 1/2 inch of buckram sticking out around the wire. And so I'm going to cut off the excess that's past that 1/2 inch because that's just going to be more bulk within the hat and we don't want that. And then I'm going to attempt to attach the velvet portion of the top of the crown to the buckram. Now, normally I would honestly just glue around and be done, but I did do a little bit of a test on here and I noticed that if you put the glue directly on the velvet and glue it to the buckram, you can just kind of see it. And like, it's really, I'm kind of torn because it'd be so much easier if I can literally just glue this where I can see it basically, but I know that I shouldn't. So I think what I might do is, because the thing is here, I don't want to glue around the outside where I'm going to be cutting away, because then when I go to cut my little crenellations around, I have to cut through glue and that's terrible on your scissors and doesn't like to happen and all of that sort of stuff. So I think I'm going to do a little glue line just about where the wire is, because that should be like kind of off the sides enough to not be obvious, but also shouldn't get in the way of me doing my cutting. So that's what I'm gonna give it a go. Okay, it's not great. You can definitely see some of that ring, but whatever, it's done. If all else fails, I will hide it with feathers because I can't with this project anymore. I just want this done. So now what I've got to do is I have to cut the little crenellations around the outside here. So basically you want to make it so that this can like bend into this, so you can shove it up in there. So you've got to get rid of all of the excess in the tabs that you don't need. And so to do that, you just cut little tabs. I normally would cut it directly to the wire, but now I'm a little bit worried that my wire is actually a little bit too small. So I'm going to cut it close to, but not on the wire, but cutting out this excess that I don't need in both the velvet and the buckram. Then when that's done, it can be added into this. But first, before I add this in, we will have to put the velvet on this too. So now we have to add the fabric over the top of the crown part. And to do that, we basically want to kind of line up the center, the seam, so that I know where things are going. And then one side of the velvet is going to have to fold over the edge so that it can get a nice finish down the back. And honestly, like, as much as I want to glue this, I think I'm actually going to sew this, because we have now discovered that that glue leaves lines and I don't want a line going right down the back of my hat. Also, it's honestly, it just looks a lot nicer when you sew this bit as opposed to glue it. So what's going on here is I want this to be kind of centered so that it's a 1/2 inch sticking off the edge on both sides. And that, once I shape it over, obviously I can't really do this while it's in midair, but once I shape it over, I will know where I can fold down, where it's going to meet, etc. And then I can pin that in place and then stitch that down. It has to be by hand because you can't get that under a machine. So it'll just be probably like whip stitches that I will be stitching it down, and then the parts that stick over the top will get folded down, and I should be able to glue that part without it looking too ugly, because otherwise I don't even know how to do that if I'm not gluing it. So glue it is. So this bit is all on now. I have pinned this seam in place. I will sew it later because I want to just keep getting with the assembly right now. So the next bit is that I can put the crown on. I've cut all of my crenellations, and so now this can all basically like shove in like that, and that means that I can take this and shove this up like that, and it should ideally fit. So this is something that I really have to do against a table though, so I can't do it on camera for you here because I don't feel like resetting my camera every time I go to do something. So I do apologize, but yeah, I just want to get this finished, and right now that is more important to me than filming every little detail because I, as I have mentioned, am very tired of this project. So actually I've already done half of it right here while I'm talking, but yeah, I really need the table to get the rest of it in. Once that's in, I will be able to, probably what I'm gonna do is whip stitch around the, where it joins right here, and then I will, once that's sewn, then I'll put some glue in from the inside of the hat, trying to get these tabs down just so it makes it a little bit neater, and then I can move on to the brim. For the brim, because this part is going to be bound over on the top, or on both sides really, I can actually glue around the very edge, and the inside is going to get more crenellations done, so like I can glue close-ish to the edge, but not quite to the edge because again I want to cut through it. But yeah, this part I can glue right around the edge because that will be covered with binding, and so I don't have to worry about that mark showing. So I'm going to do that now, and I glue on both sides. So all I've done so far is I've glued around the outside edges, both sides, so that everything's good there. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut into here. Now this time I don't have to cut like little wedges out, I just have to cut slashes because of math and stuff, basically because the way that it folds up. So I'm just going to cut those slashes. You do have to be a lot more careful when you're cutting this one because there is no wire to like stop your scissors. So especially with these scissors not being great right now, I actually might see if my older crappier scissors are now better than these slightly newer crappier scissors, so I can cut all this because obviously I'm not cutting using my fabric scissors because there's buckram in here, so please don't screw up your fabric scissors. You will not be happy if you cut buckram with your fabric scissors. Don't do that. So I'm gonna go and cut my little things there, and then that means that I'll have a whole bunch of tabs that will go into the inside of this. Now I have done this, switched to this section before I've actually sewn the top of this, just because I want to make sure that this isn't totally screwing up the shape of the hat overall. It's feeling large, even though I cut it down so much smaller and moved my wire so much smaller, it is still feeling really, really large in comparison. And like it's fitting, but I wonder if it's actually misshaping the hat, and I don't want that to happen because these hats are weird enough shaped on their own. They don't need extra help. So I just hope that this hat isn't going to be a pile of garbage by the time I'm done, basically. So that's why I've switched to this part now, and why I'm leaving kind of the hand sewing to last, because I also know that when I sit down to actually do the hand sewing, I'm going to get in like my distracted mode and not want to get up again, because that's what I did yesterday when I was working on those ribbons. All right, you can see that all of my crenellations are cut out now, and I've just kind of pulled them up. I did sort of fit this into the bottom just visually to see how it was looking. It was looking fine. The top was looking fine. So I will feel comfortable sewing that in place in a little bit. But before I do that, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put the binding on this, because if I put the binding on this before I put the crown on, I can do some of the binding by machine, and that will be so much better. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to take the bottom, which is where I've the side that I have not folded these crenellations to, and I'm going to do right sides together and do this just like bias binding. This is a piece of bias that I cut out of the velvet. It is 2 inches wide and hopefully long enough to get around the entire brim. But yeah, I'm just going to do right sides together, and then this will fold over onto the top side. The reason that I do the bottom side by machine, so that it's that clean one that doesn't have the little hand stitches showing, is because for one thing, I'm tall, so the majority of people are going to be looking up at the bottom of my hat anyway. But for two, the brim on this hat kind of wants to curve up, and it's going to be something that I'm going to have to see if it will actually even do that with the buckram. I don't know. It was on the straw, but that's because that's how it was shaped in the first place. So I don't know if it's gonna let me do that, but if it does, that's what I want. But either way, again, most people are going to be looking at the bottom of my hat anyway, so that's the side that gets the clean on the machine. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and then I will probably go ahead and sew around the top here and down the back, because then I won't have any pins and I won't have any weird susceptibility going on the top here when I go to attach this. But I will be doing the other side of the binding by hand, and I'll do that before I attach the crown as well, because again, it's just easier to maneuver. All right, so I have the bias binding on. That strip was actually plenty large for this. I think I had like 4 or 5 inches left over, so that was great. And it's all on this side. I stitched about 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. It's all pinned in place on this side, and that way I can go ahead and just hand sew that. So now I have a bunch of hand sewing before I can really do anything else. Hand sewing that, hand sewing that, hand sewing that. And then once that's all done, then I can go ahead and put these bits together. That's just going to be glue. So that part's awesome. And then I can decorate it. So we are getting closer. I will come back to you probably when I go to put these bits together. All of the hand sewing is now complete on both the top section and the brim. And so now I get to put them together. So this part, again, I'm going to be gluing. All of the little crenellations are just going to basically get pulled up and then put inside of the crown and then glued in place. And then the liner can go in, and then it's decoration time. And the liner mostly gets glued in too, because it's liner and I don't care, no one's looking inside my hat. Or at least, why are you looking inside my hat if you're looking inside my hat? Don't do that. So I pretty much just push in the liner into places where it needs to go by using hot glue. So I'm going to do a bunch of hot gluing, and I'll show you what it looks like when it is together. Okay, so the lining is in mostly. I mean, it's like glued in place, but then it's pinned around here because I realized I really do want to actually hand sew that. I just think it's going to be easier and better. So I will be whipping that. And then I turned to trimming. So I want to do a stripy band that's about like 4 inches tall. And I started with making a 4-inch wide band out of bias and hoping that I could curve it enough on the bias to get it around, because obviously this is like graduated and it's going to gap at the top if it fits at the bottom. And that's what happened. I couldn't make the bias curve enough to not make it gap at the top. So then I had the leftover narrow strips from the skirt, and so I decided to give that a try and see if I could make that work. But no, it actually still wound up gapping at the top, even though it's only like 2 inches tall. So now what I've actually done is I've gone and I've used the pattern, and I've decided, well, if I make a center front seam, then I could make a chevron and make it even all the way around. So that's what I've done. I haven't tried it on the hat yet, but I have made a chevron band that is curved like the shape of the hat pattern and about 4 inches tall. And that now will go on the hat like this and hopefully actually fit. I don't think I mentioned, by the way, but when I was gluing the brim to the crown, I had my one glue accident, which of course it's always got to happen, right? Like, I don't know. To me, it always happens somewhere. And usually it's on the very front of the hat. And that's what happened. Somehow, when I was gluing the pieces together right under here, the glue decided it wanted to use that spot to just slink through the hat and do that lovely thing. So that's a glue spot where it hit the velvet, and like there's nothing that you can do to save the velvet once the glue actually gets on it. I was able to scrape off kind of the excess glue. The good news is that the majority of this spot is on the crown, not the brim. So by putting the band on there and making sure that it kind of just like piles a little bit below, it will hide that whole bit. So now the thing is, I don't want to glue this band on there because, as I mentioned before, the reason that I made this entire thing out of velvet is because I want it more versatile, because then I just have a red hat that I could take off this stripy band and have just a red hat. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do. Ideally, I would like the band to just fit on there and have the texture of the velvet hold it into place. I don't know if that will work or not, but that's my ideal. And then I can put feathers and stuff on top of it. But yeah, so this is kind of what it's going to be so far. I feel like I look like a traffic cone, but hopefully it won't look like a traffic cone once it has feathers. Fingers crossed. Anyway, I am going to go ahead and put this band on. The back will probably be sewn, but I'm not really sure. We shall see. But my guess is probably I'll whip stitch it or something and just have it fit by, again, like that tread of the velvet. Okay, and then I'm gonna also do this whip stitching and I'll show you what it looks like when that is done and when I'm about to put the feathers on. All right, so the hat is just about done. This worked great for the band, so I just have to sew up the back seam there and then again do that whipping on the lining there. And then I also made a sort of like feather arrangement here. I just took a bunch of the feathers in my stash. Most of my feathers are from a like big batch of feathers I bought in like 2011 on eBay that were someone's bridal feathers, and so most of my feathers are lavender, and I've been slowly using them up and I still have a whole bunch of them. But and then I have a few others in here as well, plus some little like feather poofs that I think I got one time at Joann's on a clearance. And I've wrapped the base in velvet ribbon that matches all of the rest of the velvet stuff, and then I've glued on a little pin back right here, so I should just be able to pin this to the band, and that way I can have feathers that'll be easily removable, especially since this is such an arrangement. It's going to be hard to get in a hat box, so that way I can just remove this and store this separately, which will be good. And I am planning on doing a cockade on top of this too. I don't actually know how to make cockades, so this is literally just, I folded a velvet ribbon 5 times basically, and I am going to stitch that into place before it falls apart because it's trying to, and then stitch that to the front of the ribbon thing here. I might put like an earring or something sparkly on the center of it. I really haven't decided yet, so we'll see, but I've got a little bit of hand sewing to do, and then that'll be it for the hat. So this is the finished hat and band, and the band is all stitched down in the back with pretty hidden stitches, and it's completely removable from the hat. And then I did stitch down the lining on the inside as well, so that looks all nice. So the hat is done, and then this is the decoration with the finished cockade and the little decoration on the cockade, which is a clip-on earring. I hate wearing clip-on earrings, so I figure I might as well just use it for this, and I'll use the other one at some point also. But my big feather arrangement, and then the pin back, and everything's very largely whipped together, and that can slide into the band. And that is what it looks like all together. This will be the end of this vlog, and I will be doing the reveal as a getting dressed, showing the layers type video, a separate video in just a few days. You won't have to wait till next Tuesday. It'll be a Saturday video. So awesome. We're done. Peppermint Bustle. Finally, this has been taking too long, but I do hope that you enjoyed the 5th video now in this series. If you liked this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a video. I do post videos here on my YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this on Tuesdays and other sewing content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you would like to support me and all of the work that I do on my channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi accounts down below. Speaking of which, I just want to send a super big thank you to my Edwardian level patron, Heidi. So I will have the link to that down below if you want to join Heidi and the rest of my patrons. That would be so, so awesome. But anyway, thank you so, so much for joining me for this video. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!